Anna's voice cut through the darkness like a muffled scream. "Mom, I'm at the police precinct. My husband hit me and filed a report saying that I attacked him." They believe him, not me. I closed my eyes. I took a breath, and then she said something that made my whole body tense up. "There's an officer on duty here. He's nervous. He keeps looking at me like he knows me." I got out of bed without thinking, without turning on any lights, without losing a second. I started the car, and the empty streets became a black blur under my wheels. Anna was still on the line, her breathing ragged, her sobbing contained. "Mark has a cut on his arm." "Mom," he told them, "I attacked him with a knife. There's blood on his shirt. He looks like the perfect victim." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I know that scene. I've seen it 1,000 times. The aggressor turned victim, the victim turned criminal. But I never thought I would hear those words from my own daughter. "Which precinct?" I asked, and my voice came out like cold steel. "3rd Avenue, she replied between sobs. "3rd Avenue. My heart dropped. That precinct, that district. I sped up. The red light meant nothing. I ran it. The streets of the sleeping city had no right to stop me. Not tonight. Not when my daughter was trapped in a holding cell while her aggressor walked free with a fake injury and a well-rehearsed story. I arrived in 12 minutes. It should have been 20. I didn't care. I double-parked right in front of the entrance. The precinct's fluorescent lights cut the night like white knives. I pushed the glass door. The air inside smelled of old coffee and fear. A young officer was behind the counter. He looked up. He saw me. And something changed in his face. He went pale. His hand stopped halfway to the keyboard. His eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. "Excuse me," he stammered. He didn't know what. He froze. The sentence died on his lips. I stared at him. I didn't say anything yet. I just looked at him. And in that silence, in those 3 eternal seconds, I watched his throat move as he swallowed. I saw his hands tremble slightly. I saw recognition. I saw fear. "Officer," I finally said, and my voice filled the empty space like a sentence. "I'm here for my daughter, Anna Miller, and you are going to explain exactly what is going on here." Officer Ben, according to his badge, stood up so fast that his chair rolled backward. "Judge Eleanor," he whispered. "Judge." No one had called me that in 5 years. 5 years since I left the bench. But he recognized me, and by the way his eyes darted between my face and the hallway that led to the cells, I knew that something in my presence had triggered an alarm in his memory. I didn't know the detainee was your daughter," he continued, his voice getting lower and lower. "The husband filed the report first. He came in bleeding. He said she attacked him. We have protocol." "Protocol," I repeated, and the words sounded like poison in my mouth. I took a step toward the counter. Ben instinctively backed away. "Where is my daughter now?" He pointed with a trembling hand toward the hallway. "Waiting room. We haven't booked her yet. Detective Sergeant Price is reviewing the case personally. He and Mr. Mark are acquainted." Of course they are. Men like Mark always have friends in convenient places. They always know the detective sergeant, the judge, the prosecutor. They always have a network that protects them while their victims drown. "Take me to her," I ordered. Ben hesitated. He looked toward a closed door at the end of the hall. Behind that door was the detective sergeant and probably Mark playing imaginary golf with words, sealing the official version of events, deciding Anna's fate while she waited alone, scared, unable to understand how her life had turned into this nightmare. "Now, officer," I insisted, and this time it was not a request. Ben nodded. He guided me down the hallway. Our steps echoed against the gray walls. Each echo reminded me of the thousands of hallways I had walked, the thousands of cases, the thousands of women. But I never imagined I would be walking this hallway for my own daughter. Ben opened a door, and there was Anna, sitting on a plastic chair, hunched over, hugging her knees. She looked up when we entered. Her eyes were swollen, red, empty of hope. But when she saw me, something broke in her face. "Mom," she whispered, and she got up, stumbling. She ran to me. I held her as she collapsed in my arms. I felt her body trembling. I felt every sob that shook her chest. And I felt something else, something that chilled my blood. Bruises. Under the sleeve of her sweater, as she clung to me, I saw the dark edge of a hematoma. Old. Not from tonight. From days ago. Maybe weeks. I gently pulled the fabric away. Anna tried to cover herself, but it was too late. I saw the bruises that trailed up her arm like a map of violence. Finger marks, dark lines where someone had held her tightly many times. "Anna," I whispered, and my voice broke for the first time. "How long?" She shook her head. Tears fell uncontrollably. "I couldn't tell you, Mom. I couldn't. You were a judge all your life, helping women like me. And I didn't want you to think I had failed, that I had been stupid, that I didn't see the signs." I closed my eyes. The pain in her voice was unbearable. I hugged her tighter. "You didn't fail," I told her in her ear. "He failed. The system is failing right now, but I am not going to fail." I pulled away from her and looked at Ben, who was still at the door, watching the scene with an uncomfortable expression. "Officer," I said, wiping tears with the back of my hand. "I need to see the complaint report. I need to see Mark, and I need to speak with Detective Sergeant Price." Ben swallowed again. "Judge Eleanor, I remember your face because you saved my sister 10 years ago. Case Smith versus Smith. You issued the protective order that saved her life. I was 19 years old and was in the courtroom when you sentenced that man." The silence fell like a stone. Ben looked at me with something that looked like reverence mixed with guilt. "I didn't know Miss Anna was your daughter when they brought her in," he continued. "Mark arrived first, bleeding, calm, convincing. He said she had gone crazy, that she attacked him for no reason, that she needed psychiatric help. Detective Sergeant Price knows him from the country club. They were having coffee while they waited for us to bring your daughter in." Every word was a nail. Every detail confirmed what I already knew. The system was designed to believe men like Mark. "Where is he now?" I asked. Ben pointed to the door at the end of the hall. "In the detective sergeant's office," giving his official statement. I turned back to Anna. I took her face in my hands. "Look at me," I said. She obeyed, her eyes full of terror and shame. "Tonight ends differently. Do you hear me? This is not going to be like the other cases you watched fail. I know every trick, every lie, every manipulation. I know exactly how to destroy them." Something shifted in her gaze, a small flicker. Hope fragile as glass. I turned toward the door, toward the hallway, toward the office where Mark was building his castle of lies, and I started walking. Ben followed me. "Judge, the detective sergeant isn't going to," he began to say. I interrupted him without turning around. "Detective Sergeant Price is going to listen to me, and when I'm done, he's going to wish he never had coffee with Mark." My steps resonated, firm, determined. 34 years of experience walked with me. 34 years of knowing every loophole in the law, every weak point in a false accusation. I reached the office door. I did not knock. I pushed it open. Price looked up from his desk. Mark was sitting in front of him, leaning back in the chair as if he were in his living room. Impeccable white shirt, black dress pants, a watch that cost more than $5,000 shining on his wrist, a clean, perfectly placed bandage on his left forearm. He looked tired, worried, the perfect victim. When he saw me enter, something crossed his face. Surprise, then calculation, then that smile, that damned smile I had seen before on other men who thought they could manipulate any situation. "Eleanor?" he said, standing up with false courtesy. "I didn't expect to see you here." His voice was soft, controlled, like velvet over knives. "How could I not be here?" I replied, closing the door behind me. "My daughter is detained because you hit her and then had the audacity to file a false report." Price stood up too, hands raised as if to calm a situation that was just beginning. "Eleanor, I understand this is difficult, but there are procedures. Mark came in first. He has an injury. There is protocol to follow." "Protocol?" I repeated, walking toward the desk. "Let's talk about protocol then. Price, did you do a full forensic medical exam on my daughter? Did you check for injuries? Did you photograph her wounds, or did you only photograph that superficial cut on Mark's arm?" The detective sergeant blinked. His mouth opened slightly. He didn't answer. I didn't need him to. The answer was in his silence. Mark cleared his throat. "Eleanor, I know you're her mother, and this must be terrible for you, but Anna is not well. She has been under a lot of stress tonight. She lost control. I only tried to defend myself. I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the performance, the carefully rehearsed posture, the eyes that sought sympathy, the hands that moved with measured gestures. This man had practiced. He knew exactly how to look innocent, how to sound reasonable, how to turn the violence he perpetrated into an episode of madness by his victim. "How long have you been planning this, Mark?" I asked, and my voice came out like ice. "How long have you been preparing this story? A week? A month? Since when did you decide that if Anna ever tried to escape, you would turn her into a criminal?" His mask wavered just for a second, a blink, but I saw it. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied. And now his voice had an edge. "I am here because my wife attacked me with a knife. I have the wound. I have witnesses who heard the commotion. I have the right to file a report." I moved closer. Price tried to intercede, but I ignored him. "Witnesses?" I said. "What witnesses, Mark? The neighbors who called the police? The same ones who have heard screams coming from your apartment for months? Those witnesses?" The color drained from his face. Barely, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "No," he stammered. "The neighbors have nothing to do with this." I smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Oh, but they do have something to do with it. Because when Ben goes to take their statements, they are going to tell a very different story from yours. They are going to talk about the nights they heard Anna pleading for you to stop. They are going to talk about the banging against the walls, the broken plates, the day they saw her with a black eye, and you said she had fallen." Mark sat down. The mask was starting to crack. Price cleared his throat. "Eleanor, I appreciate your concern, but this is not a courtroom. You can't come in here and interrogate." "I can't?" I interrupted him, turning to him. "Price, I've known you for 20 years. We shared cases. We worked together when you were just an officer. So, I'm going to tell you something. I hope you remember. If you process my daughter without doing a complete investigation, without examining her, without taking statements from all the witnesses, I am going to sue you personally. And then I am going to make sure that every judge, every prosecutor, every officer in this city knows that you let your friendship with an aggressor cloud your judgment." The silence in that office was absolute. Price looked at me with wide eyes. Mark had lost all composure. His jaw was tense. His hands were gripping the arms of the chair. "This is intimidation," he hissed. "This is justice," I replied calmly. "Something you have avoided for a long time." I turned to Ben, who was still at the door. "Officer, I need you to do something for me. I need you to take Anna to the hospital right now. Full forensic medical exam, photographs of all her injuries, detailed medical report." Ben looked at Price, seeking approval. The detective sergeant was paralyzed. He didn't know what to do. His friend from the country club was being dismantled in front of his eyes. His convenient version of events was crumbling. "Do it," he finally said, his voice weak. Ben nodded and quickly left. Mark stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I am the victim here. I have a real wound. Anna is making it up." "Making up what?" I interrupted him. "The bruises that are weeks old, the ribs that are probably fractured, the burns on her back?" I watched his eyes widen. I had said too much. I mentioned the burns, something he thought no one knew, something Anna had hidden even from me until tonight. "How?" he started to ask, but stopped. Too late. Price had also noticed it. "Burns?" the detective sergeant asked, slowly. Mark quickly regained his composure. "I don't know what she's talking about. She's inventing things to protect her daughter. But the crack was there, and I was going to turn it into an abyss." I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't used in months. She answered on the third ring. "Sarah," I said. "My older daughter, Anna's sister." "Mom, what's wrong?" "It's 3:00 inches the morning." Her voice sounded sleepy, confused. "Sarah, I need you to come to the 3rd Avenue precinct now. Anna is here." Mark hit her and filed a false report. "I need you to bring something." There was a silence. Then I heard movement, sheets, quick steps. "What do you need?" she asked, and now her voice was steel. "The flash drive. The one Anna gave you 2 months ago. The one she asked you to hold on to?" Another silence. This one heavier. "Mom, how do you know about that?" "Because I know my daughter," I replied. "Because I know that women in situations like this always look for ways to protect themselves. They always leave hidden evidence. They always have an escape plan. Bring it now." I hung up. Mark was pale. "What flash drive?" he asked, and his voice trembled. I smiled again. "The one that contains the recordings. Mark, the recordings Anna made over the last 3 months. Every time you threatened her, every time you hit her, every time you told her that no one would believe her over you. It was a bluff. I didn't know for sure if that flash drive existed, but I knew the pattern. I knew how survivors work, and I knew Anna. My daughter was smart. Scared, yes. Trapped, yes. But smart. And by the way, Mark had just lost all the color in his face. I knew I had guessed right. That's illegal," he stammered. "Recording without consent is—" "It's admissible evidence in domestic violence cases," I interrupted him. "You would know that if you had paid attention to the laws instead of looking for ways to break them." Price slumped into his chair. He was finally understanding. He was finally seeing what was in front of him. A man who had orchestrated everything, who had cut himself, who had arrived first to control the narrative, who had connections to ensure his version was the official one. "Mark," the detective sergeant said slowly, "I think you need to call your lawyer." Mark looked at him with disbelief. "What, Price? We're friends. We play golf every Thursday. You know my character. You know I wouldn't—" "I don't know anything," Price interrupted him, and for the first time that night, I heard real authority in his voice. "And that's the problem." The door opened. Ben entered quickly. "Detective Sergeant, the ambulance is here to take Miss Anna to the hospital. The paramedics say she has visible signs of trauma, bruises in different stages of healing, possible fractured ribs, ligature marks on her wrists." Every word was a hammer. Mark sank into his chair. His perfect world, his perfect plan, was disintegrating. "Also," Ben continued, looking at me briefly, "the neighbors from apartment 203 and 205 are here. They said they heard the radio call and want to give their statements. They say it's important." Price nodded. "Send them in." 2 people entered, an older woman in a housecoat, and a tired-looking man in his 52nd. I vaguely recognized them. They must live in the same building as Anna. "Officers," the woman said without preamble, "we've come to tell the truth. That man," she pointed at Mark, "has been abusing that poor girl for months. We've heard everything. The screams, the banging, the pleas. We called the police 3 times, but whenever you arrived, he'd say everything was fine and you'd leave." The man nodded. "Tonight was different. We heard glass break. We heard Anna screaming that he was going to kill her. Then, silence. Then we saw him leave with his arm bleeding, but walking calmly like nothing. That's not the behavior of someone who was just attacked. That's the behavior of someone who is executing a plan." Mark stood up abruptly. "You don't know anything. You weren't inside the apartment. You didn't see." "We saw enough," the woman interrupted him. "And this time, we're not going to be silent." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but Price raised his hand. "Enough." The detective sergeant rubbed his temples. He seemed to have aged 10 years in the last 20 minutes. "Ben, take the full statements of these witnesses. Every detail, every date they remember, every call they made." He turned to Mark. "And you stay here. You're not going anywhere until this is cleared up." I watched Mark's mask finally crumble completely. The elegant composure evaporated. "This is a conspiracy," he spat. "All of you are against me because she—" he pointed a trembling finger at me. "She's a former judge. She has influence. She's manipulating you." "No," I said with icy calm. "You are the one who manipulates. I am only exposing the truth." I left the office. I didn't need to see more. Mark could shout all he wanted. His words no longer held power. The evidence would speak for him, and evidence never lies. I walked down the hallway to where they had taken Anna. Paramedics were loading her onto a stretcher. She looked so small, so fragile. I approached and took her hand. "I'm going with you," I told her. She nodded, squeezing my fingers tightly like when she was a child and was afraid of thunderstorms. The hospital was 12 minutes away. Anna didn't speak during the ride. She just stared at the ceiling of the ambulance with empty eyes. I held her hand the whole way. The paramedic, a young man in his 30s, checked her vital signs with a serious expression. "How long?" he asked me in a low voice. I didn't need to ask what he meant. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Months. Maybe more than a year." He nodded, writing something on his tablet. "I've seen many cases. This is a bad one. Injuries in different stages of healing indicate a sustained pattern of abuse." We arrived at the emergency room. The bright lights greeted us like a slap. They took Anna directly to an examination room. A middle-aged doctor with her hair pulled back entered almost immediately. "I'm Dr. Evans," she said, looking at me briefly before focusing on Anna. "I'm going to do a full exam. It's okay if your mother stays here." Anna nodded. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, I want her to stay." The doctor began the exam. Every time she discovered a new injury, her expression hardened. Bruises on her arms, on her ribs, on her back, circular marks on her wrists, where something had tied her, and the burns. Small round scars on her lower back, cigarette burns, old. Anna shivered when the doctor touched them gently. "When was this?" the doctor asked in a professional voice, but full of compassion. 3 months ago," Anna murmured. "He was angry because dinner wasn't ready when he got home. He said he needed to teach me discipline." I closed my eyes. Every word was a dagger. Every revelation showed me how blind I had been, how many signs I had missed, how many times Anna had sat across from me, smiling, lying, protecting me from the truth because she didn't want to disappoint me. Dr. Evans photographed every injury, measured, documented. "I'm going to order x-rays," she finally said. "I need to check the ribs, and I want you to speak with our social worker." She left the room. Anna and I were left alone. The silence was dense, heavy. "I'm sorry, Mom," she finally whispered. "I should have told you. I should have." I didn't interrupt her. "Don't apologize. None of this is your fault." I sat on the edge of the bed. "Why didn't you tell me, Anna? Why did you let it go so far?" Tears ran down her cheeks. "Because you saved so many women, your whole career. You dedicated your life to protecting victims of domestic violence, and I became one of them. I felt so ashamed, so stupid. I thought if I told you, you would look at me differently. You would think I failed, that I didn't learn anything from you." Her voice broke in sobs. I hugged her carefully, so as not to press where the bruises were. "Listen to me," I told her firmly. "You didn't fail. He failed. The system failed. I failed by not seeing, but you survived, and that takes more strength than most people have in their whole lives." The door opened. Sarah entered like a hurricane, hair disheveled, coat thrown over her pajamas. In her hand, she held a small black flash drive. Anna gasped, running toward the bed. She hugged her sister so tightly that they both cried. "I brought it," Sarah said, showing me the flash drive. I didn't listen to all of it. I couldn't. But there are hours of recordings. Anna gave it to me 2 months ago. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would give it to the police. I took the flash drive. It was light, so small, but it contained the weight of months of terror. "Why didn't you come to me with this sooner?" I asked Anna. She wiped her tears. "Because I was afraid. Mark always said that if I left him, if I tried to report him, he would destroy me. He said he had contacts, that no one would believe me, that he was Mark Miller, a respected businessman, and I was just his unstable wife. He said that if I spoke up, he would make sure I lost everything. My job, my family, my freedom." She trembled as she took a breath. "Tonight, he lost control more than ever. He broke a bottle. He cut my arm with the glass. And then I saw something in his eyes. I saw that he was going to kill me. So I fought. For the first time in months, I really fought." "And his injury?" I asked. Anna looked down. "I tried to take the glass away from him. He cut himself in the struggle. Not deep, just a scratch. But when he saw the blood, he smiled. He smiled, Mom, and said, 'Now I'm going to the police. I'm going to say you attacked me, and when they arrest you, you'll finally learn your place.'" She shuddered. "He called the police. They arrived in 8 minutes. By then, he had already bandaged himself up. He had already rehearsed his story. The officers looked at him in his suit and his calm, and they looked at me trembling and crying, and I knew they would believe him. Sarah squeezed her sister's hand. But he didn't count on Mom. She smiled through her tears. Nobody counts on Eleanor Miller when someone hurts her family. I put the flash drive in my pocket. I'm going back to the precinct. I need to give them this. I need to make sure Mark doesn't leave there until he is properly processed. Anna sat up quickly, panic in her eyes. Mom, he has a lawyer, David Vance. He's the best defense attorney in the city. He called him before you arrived. He's going to get out. He is not going to get out, I said with absolute certainty. Not this time. I kissed her forehead. Sarah is staying with you. You are not alone anymore. I left the room. The hospital hallway was quiet. It was almost 5:00 the morning. I called Ben. He answered immediately. Judge Eleanor. I have additional evidence, I said. Recordings. Is Mark still there? There was a pause. Yes, his lawyer, David Vance, arrived 20 minutes ago. He is demanding that we release his client. He says there is no probable cause, that Mark's injury is sufficient evidence of assault, and that the neighbors' testimonies are circumstantial. Of course, David Vance. I knew him. Elegant, expensive, immoral. He defended anyone who could afford his $1,000 per hour fee. Tell Price I'm on my way. Tell him not to process anything until I get there. I hung up. The dawn was beginning to break on the horizon. I got into my car. The streets were starting to wake up. Early morning workers, delivery trucks, the city coming back to life. But I was still at war. And the battle was not over. I arrived at the precinct as the sun was just painting the sky orange and pink. The streets smelled of fresh baked bread from the corner bakery. Normal life, normal people starting their normal days. While I walked back into that building where my daughter had been treated like a criminal, where her aggressor had been having coffee with the detective sergeant, as if they were old friends, I pushed the glass door. The shift had changed. There were new officers at the counter, but Ben was still there. He saw me enter, and something in his expression told me the situation had worsened. Judge, he said in a low voice, approaching quickly. David Vance is pressing hard. He threatened to sue the department for illegal detention. He says Mark is the real victim and that we are being influenced by his connection to you. I squeezed the flash drive in my pocket. Where are they? Ben pointed to the same office as before. Price is with them. He looks bad. Judge, David is good at what he does. He's dismantling every argument. He says the neighbors only heard noises. They didn't see anything, that Anna's injuries could be self-inflicted or from another incident, that the only clear physical evidence is the cut on Mark's arm. I walked toward the office. My steps sounded like sentences. Ben followed me. There's something else, he added nervously. David already contacted a judge friend. He has a preliminary release order ready to sign if we don't file solid charges in the next 2 hours. 2 hours. The system designed to protect the innocent being used to free a guilty man. I opened the door without knocking. David Vance was standing next to Mark, elegant in his dark gray suit that probably cost $3,000. Perfectly combed hair, leather briefcase on the desk. He looked at me with those calculating eyes I had seen in many lawyers who put profit before justice. Eleanor Miller, he said with a professional smile. I should have imagined you would be involved. Your daughter attacks my client, and somehow you turn this into a media circus. His tone was condescending. Calm, as if speaking to an irrational child. Your client, I replied with a voice of steel, beat my daughter for months. Tonight he tried to kill her and then cut himself to create an alibi. David laughed, a soft, professional laugh. Those are serious accusations. Do you have proof? Because I have an injured client, a wife with a history of erratic behavior, according to him, and zero forensic evidence to back up your narrative. I took the flash drive from my pocket. I placed it on Price's desk with a dry thud. Here is your proof. The silence fell like a tombstone. David looked at the flash drive. Mark went pale. What is that? The lawyer asked, but his voice had lost some confidence. Recordings, I said. Months of recordings that Anna made secretly. Every threat, every blow. Every time your client told her that if she left him, he would destroy her. Every time he told her that no one would believe her because he was Mark Miller and she was nobody. Mark stood up abruptly. "Those recordings are illegal. They can't be used. I didn't give consent." David raised his hand to silence him, but it was too late. Price connected the flash drive to his computer. "In domestic violence cases," the detective sergeant said slowly, looking at the screen, "recordings made by victims in their own home are admissible as evidence, especially when there is a reasonable fear for their safety." He clicked. The audio began to play. Mark's voice filled the office. Cold, cruel, completely different from the polite man who had been sitting here hours ago. "If you tell anyone, Anna, you will regret it. Do you think your mother is going to save you? Do you think anyone is going to believe me? A respected businessman or you, a hysterical wife?" Sound of something breaking. A muffled scream. Shut up, or it will be worse." More sounds, blows, sobs. "This is your fault. Everything is your fault. If you were a better wife, I wouldn't have to do this." Price paused the recording. His face was ashen. David had lost all his elegant composure. "There is more," I said. "Hours more, different dates, all time-stamped, all verifiable." David quickly regained his composure. "This could be edited, manipulated. We will need forensic verification of the audio." "Of course," I agreed. "And while they verify, Mark remains detained without bail, because we just heard direct threats of death, because we have medical evidence that matches the dates of the recordings, because we have witnesses who confirm the pattern of abuse." I looked at Mark. He was trembling. The mask had completely fallen. He was no longer the respectable businessman. He was just a scared man who knew his world was collapsing. "Something to say now, Mark?" He opened his mouth. He closed it. His eyes darted between David, Price, and me, looking for escape. There was none. "I want to talk to my lawyer in private," he finally mumbled. Price nodded. "Ben, take Mr. Miller to the interrogation room. David can accompany him." When they left, the detective sergeant sank into his chair. He looked exhausted, ashamed. "Eleanor, I didn't know. Mark and I play golf. He seemed like a good guy. I never imagined." "You never imagined," I interrupted him. "Because you didn't want to see. Because it was easier to believe the man in the expensive suit than the frightened woman." Price rubbed his face. "You're right. I failed. I should have done the full exam from the beginning. I should have listened to the neighbors months ago when they called. I should have." "You should have," I agreed. "But now you can correct it. Process Mark. Full charges. Aggravated assault. Felony battery. Threats, continuous domestic abuse, and make sure he doesn't get out on bail." He nodded slowly. "I will. I'll call the prosecutor on duty. With this evidence, there's no way a judge will grant him freedom." He picked up the phone. While he was dialing, I looked out the window. The sun was already high. A new day had begun. But I felt like I had lived a whole week in one night. My phone vibrated. "Sarah. Mom." The x-rays came back. Anna has 2 fractured ribs, an old fracture in her wrist, which never healed properly, and old head trauma. The doctor says it's consistent with repeated blows over months. I closed my eyes. Every word was confirmation of my worst nightmare. "How is she?" I asked. "Sedated. They gave her something for the pain and shock. She's sleeping." "But Mom," she told me something before she fell asleep. She said Mark has videos of her in compromising situations. She says he drugged her and recorded her, that he uses them to blackmail her, that he threatened to upload them to the internet if she left him. The rage I felt in that moment was like lava, pure, burning, destructive. "Where are those videos?" Sarah hesitated. "On his computer in his home office. Anna says he keeps them there as insurance." I hung up with Sarah and turned to Price. "I need a search warrant for Mark's apartment and for his office now." The detective sergeant looked up. "Why?" "Because there is more evidence. Evidence of extortion, of sexual abuse, of crimes that go beyond physical violence." Price swallowed. He nodded. "I'll call the on-call judge." 30 minutes later, we had the warrant. Ben and 2 other officers were preparing to go to the apartment. "I'm going with you," I said. Ben seemed to hesitate. "Judge, technically you are an interested party. Your presence could compromise." I don't care, I interrupted him. That is the house where my daughter was tortured. I'm going. He didn't argue anymore. We got into the patrol cars. The building where Anna had lived her nightmare was 15 minutes away. A nice modern building with a doorman and gardens. No one would imagine the horrors that occurred behind closed doors. The doorman recognized us. His expression was uncomfortable. Are you going to Mark Miller's apartment? He asked. Ben nodded. We have a search warrant. The doorman lowered his voice. That poor lady. Miss Anna, always so kind, always smiling. But I knew. Doormen always know. We'd see her go in happy and come out with red eyes. How he would treat her sweetly in public, but look at her coldly when he thought no one was watching. He gave us the master key. We went up in the elevator. 12th floor, apartment 1203. The door opened, revealing an impeccable space, elegant furniture, art on the walls, a beautiful view of the city, a gilded cage where Anna had been a prisoner. I entered the apartment, and the smell of expensive cologne hit me. Everything was tidy. Too tidy. Like a stage set up to impress visitors. Abstract paintings on the walls, beige rug without a single stain, cream leather sofa that probably cost $10,000. But I didn't see luxury. I saw a prison. I saw the place where my daughter had suffered in silence while the outside world thought she had a perfect life. Ben and the other officers began the systematic search. The office is this way, I said, remembering the few times I had visited this place. Anna always insisted on meeting at my house. Now I understood why. Mark's office was exactly as I imagined. Dark wood desk, shelves full of books he probably never read, framed diplomas on the wall, photographs of him shaking hands with important people, politicians, businessmen, judges. A carefully cultivated network of power. Ben turned on the computer. It was password protected. We'll need technical assistance too, he started to say. Try his date of birth, I suggested. Men like Mark were predictable, arrogant. They thought no one would dare invade their space. Ben tried. It didn't work. Wedding anniversary. Not that either. Then I remembered something Anna had mentioned once. Try the name of his company followed by the year he founded it. Ben typed. The computer unlocked. Of course, for Mark, his business was more important than any human relationship. He began to review files, meticulously organized folders, contracts, financial documents, and then he found it. A hidden folder. No name, just a symbol. Ben clicked. My stomach churned. Videos. Dozens of videos. Dates going back more than a year. Don't open them, I said quickly. Just document that they are there. We need to preserve the chain of custody. This is going to trial. Ben nodded, taking pictures of the screen. He called the cybercrimes unit. I need you to come here. We have sensitive digital evidence. While we waited, I continued exploring the office. I opened drawers, filing cabinets. In the third desk drawer, I found something that chilled my blood. A thick manila folder. I opened it. Photographs. Photographs of Anna taken without her knowledge. In the shower, sleeping, changing clothes, and something else. Documents. Anna's private medical records that Mark had obtained illegally, reports from her work, psychological evaluation that he had manipulated to make her look unstable. Ben, I called. He approached. I showed him the contents of the folder. His expression darkened. This is systematic harassment, illegal surveillance, identity theft. This is control, I said. Mark didn't just hit her. He studied her. He documented every aspect of her life. He built a complete file to use against her if she ever tried to escape. I found more copies of emails between Mark and David Vance from 6 months ago. In them, Mark discussed strategies to discredit Anna if she became problematic. They talked about planting doubts about her mental stability, about creating false evidence of infidelity, about using his connections to ruin her professional reputation. It was a plan, a detailed, calculated plan to destroy her. The cybercrimes technicians arrived. They began copying the entire hard drive, every file, every document, every video. One of them, a young woman with a serious expression, approached me. Ma'am, what is on this computer is enough for multiple federal charges: extortion, non-consensual pornography, cyber harassment. This man is a systematic predator. I nodded. I knew it. I always knew it on some level, but having the physical evidence in front of me was different. It was real. It was irrefutable. How long do you need? I asked. For the full analysis days, but to extract the basics and file initial charges, a few hours. I left the office. I needed air. I walked toward the balcony. The view was beautiful. The city stretched out like a living map. From up here, everything looked neat, perfect. But I knew the truth. Behind every window, every door, there were stories. Some happy, others dark, like Anna's. My phone vibrated. Price. Eleanor, Mark is demanding to see a judge. David is filing a motion for habeas corpus. He says the detention is illegal. I smiled without humor. Tell David that we have additional evidence, videos, documents, a premeditated plan of abuse and extortion, and that in the next few hours his client is going to face federal charges in addition to the state ones. There was silence on the other side. Then Price sighed. Mark just broke. When we told him about the search warrant, he started shouting. He said everything on that computer was private, that we had no right. David tried to silence him, but he kept talking. He basically confessed that there was compromising material without us asking him. I laughed, a bitter laugh. Criminals always betray themselves, always keep the recording of that spontaneous confession. David is going to try to suppress it, but with a little luck, the judge will admit it. I hung up. Ben came out to meet me on the balcony. Everything is documented. The computer is going to the lab. The physical documents are going to evidence. Good, I said. Let's go back. I want to be there when they formally process Mark. We went down. The doorman stopped us in the lobby. Did you find anything? He asked in a low voice. I shouldn't have answered him. It was an active investigation. But something in his expression made me speak. We found enough to ensure he never hurts anyone again. The doorman nodded slowly. Good. That Miss Anna deserves justice. Everyone here knew it. But no one did anything. Myself included. I'm ashamed. I put a hand on his shoulder. Now you can do something. If the case goes to trial, they are going to need witnesses. People who saw, who heard, who can confirm the pattern. We'll tell everything, he promised. Back at the precinct, the sun was already high in the sky. I had been up all night, but I didn't feel tired. I felt purpose. We entered. The energy had changed. Officers spoke in low voices. There were more people. A woman in a formal suit was at the counter. She recognized me immediately. Judge Miller, she said, extending her hand. I'm Prosecutor Kate Jennings. Detective Sergeant Price brought me up to speed on the case. I knew her by reputation. Tough, smart, with an impressive track record of convictions in domestic violence cases. I need to review all the evidence. She continued. The recordings, the medical reports, the testimonies. If this is as solid as they told me, I'm going to request detention without bail. It is solid, I assured her. And there is more. We just seized a computer with evidence of additional crimes, extortion, revenge, pornography, systematic harassment. Kate's eyes shone, not with joy, with determination. Perfect. I'm going to sink this man so deep he'll never see the light of day. I liked her style. Direct, no nonsense. Where is Mark now? I asked. Interrogation room 3. David is with him. They are waiting for the bail hearing. Kate checked her watch. Which will be in 2 hours. Enough time to prepare my case. She turned to Ben. Officer, I need certified copies of everything. Every recording, every photo, every testimony. I want them on my desk in 1 hour. I sat in a chair in the hallway. I finally felt the weight of exhaustion. I closed my eyes for a moment, just a moment, and I saw Anna's face. Not the scared face from this morning, but her face as a child. Laughing, running, free. My phone vibrated, snapping me out of my thoughts. Sarah! Mom! Anna woke up. Anna woke. She's asking for you. She wants to know what happened to Mark. I stood up. Tell her I'm on my way. Tell her Mark is not getting out. That this time the system worked. I drove back to the hospital. The mid-morning traffic was heavy. Office workers rushing to jobs they hated. Mothers taking children to school. Normal life flowing around my personal storm. I arrived at the hospital. I went up to the 4th floor. Anna's room was at the end of the hall. I knocked softly before entering. Anna was sitting up in bed, still pale, still with visible marks on her face. But her eyes had something different. It was no longer that desperate emptiness from last night. There was a faint glimmer, hope, fragile as glass. Sarah was sitting next to her, holding her hand. "Mom," Anna said when she saw me. Her voice was hoarse, tired. "Is it true? Did they really find everything?" I sat on the other side of the bed. "We found it. The recordings you made, the videos he made, the documents, everything. Mark is detained. The prosecutor is going to ask that he not be granted bail." Tears ran down her cheeks. But this time they were different. Not of fear, of relief. "I can't believe it's over," she whispered. I lived with so much fear for so long. Every morning I woke up wondering if that would be the day he would kill me. Every night I fell asleep praying to survive until dawn. Sarah squeezed her hand. "You don't have to live like that anymore." Anna nodded. Then she looked at me with eyes full of guilt. "Mom, all your life you helped women like me, and I couldn't even help myself. I feel so ashamed." "No," I said firmly, taking her other hand. "Listen to me carefully, Anna. What you went through was not weakness. It was survival. You did what you had to do to stay alive. You recorded evidence. You gave it to Sarah. You planned your escape even when it seemed impossible. That is not shame. That is strength." Anna sobbed, "But I should have left sooner. I should have." "There is no should have," I interrupted her. "Victims of abuse leave when they can, not when others think they should. The right time is when you manage to get out alive, and you did it." Sarah hugged us both. 3 generations of women, broken, but not destroyed. Dr. Evans entered with a thick folder. "Good morning. I came to check how you're doing." She examined Anna, checked her vital signs, changed bandages. "The ribs are going to hurt for weeks. You will need painkillers and rest. The contusions will heal. The physical scars will eventually fade." She paused. "But you need professional help for the wounds that don't show. We have excellent therapists specializing in trauma. I recommend you start as soon as possible." Anna nodded. "I will. I don't want to carry this alone anymore." The doctor smiled. "Good. I also spoke with social workers. There are safe shelters if you need a place to stay while you reorganize your life. Restraining orders. Free legal assistance. You are not alone in this." She handed her a list of resources, emergency numbers, support groups, crisis hotlines available 24 hours. "Thank you," Anna said in a low voice. The doctor left. The silence filled the room. A different silence, not heavy with fear, but loaded with possibility, with future. My phone vibrated. Ben. "Judge, the bail hearing starts in 30 minutes. Kate is ready. She's coming." "I'm coming," I replied. I looked at Anna. "The bail hearing is in half an hour. Do you want me to stay here with you, or do you want me to go and make sure they don't release him?" Anna took a deep breath. "Go. I need to know he's not getting out, that he's not coming to find me." I kissed her forehead. "He is not getting out, I promise you." Sarah accompanied me to the elevator. "Mom, thank you for believing, for fighting, for not giving up." I hugged her. It's what mothers do. They protect their daughters always. I went down to the parking lot. I drove back to the courthouse. The courthouse building was familiar. I had spent decades walking those hallways, dictating sentences, changing lives, but I had never been on this side, never as a victim's family member. The courtroom was on the 3rd floor. I entered. Kate was already there reviewing documents. She saw me and nodded. Mark was sitting with David, still in his clothes from yesterday, wrinkled now, unshaven, red eyes, the mask of the successful businessman completely gone. He saw me enter. Something crossed his face. Hatred. Pure hatred, but also fear. I saw him swallow. "Look away." The judge entered. "All rise." Judge Grant. I knew him. We had worked together years ago. Fair, strict. He did not tolerate manipulation. "Case of the state versus Mark Miller," the clerk announced. Kate stood up. "Your Honor, the state requests detention without bail. The defendant faces charges of aggravated assault, felony battery, threats, continuous domestic abuse, extortion, cyber harassment, and non-consensual pornography. He is a clear danger to the victim and the community. David stood up. Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman with no criminal record. He has deep roots in the community. He is not a flight risk. Detention without bail is excessive. Judge Grant looked at the documents in front of him. Prosecutor, do you have evidence to support these charges? Kate opened her briefcase. I have audio recordings where the defendant explicitly threatens the victim. Medical reports documenting injuries in different stages of healing consistent with prolonged abuse. Testimonies from neighbors confirming the pattern. Digital evidence seized from the defendant's residence showing premeditated planning of abuse and extortion. And forensic photographs taken this morning showing the severity of the most recent attack. The judge held out his hand. Kate handed him a folder. He began to review. The silence in the room was absolute. Only the turning of pages could be heard. Judge Grant looked up. His expression was severe. Mr. Miller, please stand. Mark stood up. He was visibly trembling. I have reviewed the preliminary evidence presented by the prosecutor. It is one of the most exhaustive and disturbing compilations I have seen in domestic violence cases. He paused. The recordings alone are sufficient to deny bail. The explicit death threats, the documented pattern of coercive control, the evidence of planning to discredit the victim if she sought help. All of this paints the portrait of an extremely dangerous individual. David tried to interrupt. Your Honor, those recordings could be edited. The judge raised his hand. Defense counsel, you will have time to challenge the evidence at trial, but for the purposes of this bail hearing, I find sufficient probable cause. He turned to Mark. Mr. Miller, bail is denied. You will remain detained in the county jail until trial. Furthermore, I am issuing a permanent restraining order. You cannot approach within 500 yards of the victim, her family, her workplace, or her residence. Any violation will result in additional charges. Mark collapsed. He literally collapsed. His legs gave out. David Vance had to support him. No, 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 he mumbled. This can't be happening. I'm Mark Miller. I have rights. I have connections. This is a mistake. The judge slammed the gavel. Officer, remove the defendant. 2 guards approached. They handcuffed Mark. He kept muttering, denying his perfect world built on lies and control, finally collapsing. They took him out of the courtroom. His protests faded down the hall. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing this video. It really helps the channel grow. Kate approached me. It's a good start. Now comes the hard part, building the case for trial. But with all this evidence, I'm confident. I left the courtroom feeling something I hadn't felt in hours. Relief. It wasn't victory yet. The trial would come. Mark's lawyers would try every trick. But for now, Anna was safe. Mark was behind bars where he belonged. I walked through the courthouse hallways. I passed in front of rooms where I had dictated hundreds of sentences. I saw my reflection in a window. I seemed to have aged 10 years in one night. But my eyes had fire purpose. It wasn't over. I called Sarah. Mark won't get out. The judge denied bail. I heard a gasp of relief, then tears. Anna is crying, but with happiness. She says that for the first time in 2 years, she can breathe. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. I hesitated. I answered, Judge Miller. It was a woman's voice, young, trembling. Yes, who is speaking? There was a pause. My name is Laura. Laura Reed. I saw the news about Mark Miller, about his arrest. Something in her tone put me on alert. How can I help you? Another silence. Ragged breathing. I dated Mark 3 years ago before he met your daughter, and he did the same thing to me. I closed my eyes. Of course, abusers don't start suddenly. They have a history. They have a pattern. Do you want to talk about it? I asked gently. I need to talk about it, Laura said in a broken voice. For 2 years I lived in terror. He hit me. He controlled me. He had videos of me like the ones they are mentioning in the news. When I finally escaped, he threatened me. He said that if I spoke up, he would destroy my life. And I believed him. He had money, contacts, power. So I kept quiet. I moved to another city. I changed my number. I tried to forget. Her voice broke. But I never forgot. And when I saw that Mark was arrested, that finally someone believed one of his victims, I knew I had to speak up. I can't let him walk free. I can't let him do this to another woman. Laura, I said firmly, your testimony could be crucial. Would you be willing to testify? To give a formal statement? She hesitated. Will you protect me? Mark has friends, powerful people. If they know I spoke, we will protect you, I promised. And you are not alone. There are other victims. Together, you are stronger than any connection Mark has. Laura took a deep breath. Okay, I'll do it. For your daughter, for me, for all the women he hurt. I gave her Kate's number. I told her to contact her immediately. I hung up, feeling chills. How many more were there? How many women had Mark destroyed before Anna? I returned to the hospital. Anna was sleeping. Sarah was reading in the chair next to the bed. How was it? I asked in a low voice. Quiet. After you told her about the bail, she finally relaxed. The doctor says she can leave tomorrow if the control x-rays look good. I sat down. I watched her sleep. My girl, who had grown up too fast, who had suffered too much, but who had survived. My phone vibrated again. Kate. Eleanor, I just spoke with Laura Reed. Her testimony is gold. It establishes a pattern of behavior. It proves that Mark is a repeat offender. This greatly strengthens our case. Are there more? I asked, although I feared the answer. 2 more women called after seeing the news, Kate replied, both with similar stories. Mark met them, seduced them, then the cycle of abuse began. Control, violence, threats, extortion with intimate material, the exact same tactics. I felt nauseous. 5 known victims. How many more were too afraid to speak? We need to gather them, I said. All together, let them know each other. Let them know they are not alone. Kate agreed. I'll organize a meeting. But Eleanor, there's something else. David Vance resigned from the case. I straightened up. What? He just filed a formal withdrawal. He says he has a conflict of interest. That was unexpected. David never abandoned high-profile cases. He loved the attention, the money. Why? I asked. Kate laughed without humor. Because one of the videos on Mark's computer implicates him. Apparently, David knew about the intimate material. In fact, he helped Mark create the extortion plan. He is cited in emails discussing strategies to silence victims. My jaw clenched. So David is an accomplice. Exactly. And now he faces his own investigation by the Bar Association. He could lose his license. Justice, finally. Who is going to defend Mark now? I asked. They assigned him a public defender, a young lawyer, competent, but without David's resources or connections. That was good for us. It meant Mark couldn't buy his way out. He couldn't use influence or money to manipulate the system. The playing field was leveled, vulnerable, like he had made all his victims feel. The following days were a whirlwind. Anna left the hospital. She temporarily moved in with me. She couldn't go back to that apartment. Not yet. Maybe never. Sarah took time off work to be with her sister. We organized therapy, support groups, safe spaces where Anna could begin to heal. Kate organized the meeting with the other victims. It was in a private room at the prosecutor's office. When Anna entered and saw the other 4 women, something happened. Recognition. They didn't know each other, but they recognized each other. In each other's eyes, they saw their own pain reflected. Laura was the first to speak. I thought I was the only one. I thought there was something wrong with me, that somehow I provoked his violence. The others nodded. One by one, they shared their stories. The details were different, but the pattern was identical. Mark chose strong, intelligent, successful women and systematically destroyed them from the inside. Anna listened to every story with tears running down her cheeks. When it was her turn to speak, her voice was barely a whisper. Thank you for being brave, for speaking out. Because now I know I'm not crazy, that it wasn't my fault. The 5 women hugged each other, strangers united by shared trauma, but also by shared hope, by the promise that this time the system would not fail. This time the abuser would pay. Kate watched from the back of the room. When they finished, she approached. Ladies, what you have is powerful. 5 independent testimonies, 5 stories that follow the same pattern. This is not a coincidence. This is evidence of a serial predator. Preparation for the trial began. Depositions, interviews, review of evidence every day brought new discoveries. More videos, more documents, more proof of the systematic nature of Mark's abuse. The public defender tried to negotiate. He offered for Mark to plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. Kate refused him. "We are going to trial, and we are going to win." 2 months later, the trial began. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, activists, domestic violence survivors who came to support. Anna was sitting in the front row with me and Sarah. She was trembling, but she was there, strong, determined. Mark entered in handcuffs. There was nothing left of the elegant man I had known. Time in jail had changed him. Sunken eyes, emaciated face, but what had changed the most was his posture. There was no more arrogance, only defeat. Kate presented the case with surgical precision. The recordings were played, the medical testimonies presented, the videos explained without being shown publicly to protect the victims. Every piece of evidence was a nail in Mark's coffin. The public defender did what he could. He tried to argue that the recordings were out of context, that the injuries could have other explanations, but it was useless. The evidence was overwhelming. The most powerful moment came when Anna took the stand. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. She walked with her head held high. She was no longer the broken woman from that morning at the precinct. She was a survivor. Kate guided her gently through her testimony. "Can you tell us when the abuse began?" Anna took a deep breath. 3 months after we got married. It was something small at first, a push, then a slap, always followed by apologies, flowers, promises that it would never happen again. But it always happened, and each time, it was worse. "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Kate asked. It was the question everyone asks, the question that never understands the complexity of abuse. Anna looked directly at the jury. "Because I was afraid. Because Mark controlled everything. My money, my friends, my job. He systematically isolated me until I felt like I had nowhere to go. And when I finally gathered the courage to plan my escape, he found the recordings I had made secretly. He threatened to destroy me if I spoke up. He said he had friends in important places, that no one would believe me." Her voice broke, but she continued. "And he was almost right. When I called the police that night, they believed him, not me." The public defender stood up for the cross-examination. He tried to be aggressive. "Isn't it true that you have a history of anxiety?" Anna nodded. "Yes, I developed severe anxiety after months of living with constant terror." "And isn't it true that you sought psychiatric help?" "Yes, because my husband was mentally destroying me." The defender tried another angle. "Isn't it possible that some of these injuries were accidental?" Anna stared at him. Accidental cigarette burns, accidental broken ribs, accidental ligature marks. Her voice rose. "No, nothing was accidental. Everything was deliberate, calculated, designed to break me." The lawyer backed away. He had no further questions. Anna stepped down from the stand. When she passed Mark, he tried to look at her. She didn't return his gaze. He no longer had power over her. Then came the other victims. One by one, they went up and told their stories. Laura spoke of how Mark had isolated her from her family, of how he had convinced her that no one would love her like him, of how when she finally escaped, he harassed her for months. Another victim, a woman named Lisa, described how Mark had ruined her career. He had contacted her boss with lies. He had sabotaged projects. He had gotten her fired just to show that he could control every aspect of her life. The pattern was undeniable. 5 women, 5 almost identical stories, all describing the same cycle. Seduction, isolation, control, violence, threats. The jury listened with increasingly somber expressions. Some had tears in their eyes. Kate presented the digital evidence. A forensic expert explained how Mark had maintained meticulous files of compromising material, how he had used technology to spy on his victims, how he had built an entire system designed to keep them trapped. "This is not a case of ordinary domestic violence," Kate said in her closing arguments. "This is the case of a serial predator who used his position, his money, and his connections to systematically victimize vulnerable women." She walked in front of the jury. Mark Miller did not lose control in moments of anger. He exerted absolute control. He planned, he documented, He executed a pattern of abuse that he inflicted on 5 known victims over years. She pointed to the boxes of evidence. The recordings you heard, the medical reports you saw, the testimonies you heard. Everything points to a man who knew exactly what he was doing, and who did it again and again without remorse. She turned to Mark. The defendant had multiple opportunities to stop. Every time a victim escaped, he found another. Every time someone tried to report him, he used his influence to silence them, until that morning when his plan finally failed. Kate walked back to the jury, because this time the victim had a mother who knew how the system works. A former judge who knew every tactic Mark would try to use and who was not going to allow another woman to be destroyed. She paused. But it shouldn't be necessary to have a judge as a mother to receive justice. It shouldn't be necessary to have 5 victims speak to be believed. 1 victim should be enough. 1 testimony should be enough. And this evidence, she pointed to the boxes again, is more than enough to declare Mark Miller guilty of all charges. The public defender did his best. He argued that Mark had anger management issues, that he needed treatment, not prison, that the circumstances were more complex than they seemed. But his words sounded hollow. He had no answer for the recordings. He had no explanation for the repeated pattern. He had no defense against the mountain of evidence. The jury retired to deliberate. We waited 3 hours, 4, 5. Every minute felt like an eternity. Anna squeezed my hand tightly. "What if they find him innocent?" she whispered. "They won't," I assured her. "The evidence is too clear." But deep down I was afraid. I had seen solid cases crumble. I had seen the guilty walk free. I had seen the system fail too many times. Finally, after 6 hours, the jury returned. We all stood up. The foreman of the jury, an older man with a serious expression, held the paper with the verdict. Judge Grant spoke. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor." "How do you find the defendant on the charge of aggravated assault?" The foreman looked directly at Mark. "Guilty." A collective gasp filled the courtroom. "On the charge of felony battery?" "Guilty." "On the charge of continuous abuse?" "Guilty." One by one, each charge was read, and each time the answer was the same. "Guilty, guilty, guilty." Mark collapsed into his chair. His lawyer tried to console him, but it was useless. His world had officially ended. Anna broke into sobs. Sarah hugged her. The other victims in the room were crying, but not out of sadness. Out of relief, out of validation, out of justice. Finally served. Judge Grant slammed the gavel. "Sentencing will be set in 2 weeks." We left the courtroom. Outside, reporters waited. Kate gave a brief statement. Today, the system worked. 5 brave women spoke out, and a serial predator was found guilty. This verdict sends a message. Domestic abuse will not be tolerated, no matter who you are, no matter how much money you have. Anna also spoke with a trembling but clear voice. "I want other victims to know they are not alone, that their voices matter, that there is justice. It may take time. It may be difficult, but it exists." The 2 weeks until sentencing passed quickly. Anna began to rebuild her life. She went back to her job. She found a new apartment, small but safe. Sarah helped her move. I decorated with them. Finally, the day of sentencing arrived. The courtroom was full again. Mark was brought in handcuffs. He looked defeated, broken. Judge Grant reviewed the documents. "Mr. Miller, you have been found guilty of multiple serious charges. I have reviewed the pre-sentence reports. I have considered the systematic nature of your crimes, the coldness with which you victimized multiple women over years." He looked directly at Mark. "You used your position and resources to cause immeasurable harm. You destroyed lives. You traumatized women who trusted you. And you did it without remorse." He paused. "Therefore, I sentence you to 25 years in state prison without possibility of parole for the first 15 years. Furthermore, you must register as a violent offender for life." The gavel fell final, definitive, 25 years. Mark was 42. He would come out an old man if he came out. Anna closed her eyes. Tears ran freely. But this time she was smiling through them. Sarah and I hugged her. It was finally over. 6 months later, life had found a new rhythm. Anna moved definitively into her apartment. A bright place on the third floor with large windows that let in the sun. No shadows, no dark corners where fear could hide. Sarah visited every weekend. They cooked together. They laughed. They healed. I went on Wednesdays. We drank coffee on her small balcony and talked about everything and nothing. Future plans, forgotten dreams that were beginning to revive. One Tuesday afternoon, Anna called me. "Mom, can you come over? There's something I want to show you." Her voice sounded different, lighter. I arrived in 20 minutes. When she opened the door, she was smiling. A real smile, not forced, not faked. Real. "Look," she said, leading me to her living room. On the table there were papers. I recognized them immediately. Divorce petition finally signed, processed, sealed. It arrived today. It's official. I am no longer married to him. She took the papers with hands that no longer trembled. "I'm free, Mom. Legally and officially free." I hugged her. I felt her body completely relax for the first time in years. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered. "Of your strength, of your courage, of how you survived." She pulled away, wiping away happy tears. "I didn't just survive. I'm living, truly living, for the first time since I met Mark." She sat on the sofa. "I started writing a book about my experience. Kate told me it could help other women, that my story could make a difference." She smiled shilly. "I don't know if it will be good, but I need to get it out. I need to turn the pain into something useful." I sat next to her. "It will be more than good. It will be important, because it comes from the truth, from real experience." Anna nodded. And I started giving talks in women's shelters at universities talking about the red flags about how abuse doesn't always start with physical violence. Sometimes it starts with isolation, with control, with making you doubt yourself. "The other victims are also healing," she continued. "Laura opened a nonprofit organization to help survivors. Lisa went back to college. We are all rebuilding together." She took my hand. "And it all started because you didn't give up. Because when I called that morning, you came. You fought. You didn't let the system fail me." I squeezed her hand. "I did what any mother would do." She shook her head. "No, you did what an exceptional mother does. You used your knowledge, your experience, your strength, and you saved my life." We sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only exists when there are no more secrets, when all the pain has been exposed to the light and is beginning to heal. My phone vibrated. "Sarah, are you two together? I'm coming over. I have news." She arrived 30 minutes later, with a bottle of non-alcoholic wine and a radiant face. "Remember I filed the formal complaint against Price?" she asked. We had forgotten. With everything that happened, the investigation against the detective sergeant had been relegated to the background. He was suspended without pay. Full investigation for negligence and favoritism. Other cases are being reviewed, cases where he may have let abusers go because they were his friends. It was justice. Late, but real. The system hadn't just failed Anna. It had failed dozens of women, because a man in a position of power had put friendship before duty. "And there's more," Sarah continued. "David Vance lost his license permanently. The ethics board found that he had actively helped cover up crimes not just with Mark, with other clients too." Wow. The pieces continued to fall into place. Not only the aggressor had paid, his facilitators also faced consequences. It should have been that way from the beginning, but better late than never. We drank coffee, we ate cake that Sarah had brought, we talked about normal things, movies, books, plans for the holidays. For the first time in years, we were just a family without crisis, without fear, just women who loved each other sharing a quiet afternoon. As the sun began to set, I walked toward the balcony. I looked at the city spreading out toward the horizon, lights beginning to turn on, life continuing in millions of windows. I wondered how many of those windows hid the kind of horror Anna had lived through. How many women were out there right now, scared, trapped, not knowing there was a way out? Anna joined me. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About all the others," I replied honestly. "About the women who don't have a former judge as a mother, who don't have sisters who hide evidence, who are alone facing what you faced." Anna looked toward the city too. "That's why I'm writing the book. That's why I give talks." Because I want them to know they are not alone, that there is help, that there is hope. She turned to me. Do you know what the strangest thing is? For months, I thought that if Mark went to prison, I would feel vindicated, victorious. But that's not what I feel. What do you feel? I asked. She thought for a moment. Peace. Just peace. Because I don't have to look over my shoulder anymore. I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to live with constant fear that someone will discover my secret. She smiled softly. I feel like myself again, like the Anna from before Mark, but stronger, because now I know what I'm capable of. I know I can survive the worst and keep going. I hugged her, my girl who had walked through hell and come out the other side. Not without scars. The scars were there. They always would be. But they no longer defined her. That night driving home, I thought about everything that had happened. The call at 3, 0 inches the morning that changed everything. The precinct where Ben recognized my face and realized he had made a mistake. Mark sitting in that office with his mask of the perfect victim. The recordings that exposed the truth. The other victims who found the courage to speak. The verdict that finally brought justice. And Anna rebuilding her life piece by piece. I understood something fundamental that night. For 34 years as a judge, I had protected thousands of women. I had dictated sentences. I had issued restraining orders. I had changed lives. But no sentence had mattered as much to me as this one. Because this time, it wasn't just a case. It was my daughter, my blood, my heart. And I had learned that knowledge and experience mean nothing if you can't use them to protect those you love. That morning at the precinct, when I pushed open that door and saw the fear in Ben's eyes, I didn't go in as a judge. I went in as a mother who was not going to allow the system to fail her daughter. A mother willing to fight against every obstacle, every corrupt connection, every manipulation tactic. And in the end, that was enough. Not because I was special, but because the truth is powerful when it is given a voice. I arrived at my house, silent, empty, but not lonely, because I knew that miles away, Anna was sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. Sarah was planning her next visit. The other victims were still healing, and Mark was where he belonged, paying for every life he had destroyed. I poured myself a cup of tea. I sat in my favorite armchair. I closed my eyes, and I understood the most important lesson of my entire career. It's not about revenge. It was never about revenge. It's about protection, about making sure victims can sleep without fear, about giving them a voice when the world tries to silence them, about being there when the system fails. Because sometimes the system fails, but mothers don't. True protectors don't. And that morning, when my daughter needed me, I was there. And that made all the difference.